Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 71, and it's going to be part 4 of the story Connections, which is an ongoing story still being written, and I've really enjoyed writing this one this week. Let's go ahead and make that full screen. This is the version of it that I also record on video that I put out on YouTube, so it's without any editing or without any particular, if any flubs exist, they will remain. Then I will clean up the audio and put it out as a audio podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and so on, as well as CryptoBiography.com. If you have comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter or Facebook. And here we go. Connections, Part 4. When the prosecutor and the defense gave their closing arguments and the room was adjourned, Rourke went up to Grant and simply asked, "Are you ready?" "Ready," Grant replied. That was the morning. The jury took most of the day to come to a decision, but finished mid-afternoon. The guilty verdicts came in, one after another, with only a couple of minor charges being found not guilty. Rourke stood up and walked near the exit. He turned around and caught Grant's eye. Grant was standing very close to Wolf. He brought up his right arm close to his chest, palm out, and touched his forearm with the fingertips of his left hand. Grant nodded and, making a scratching motion, unbuttoned part of the cuff of his right hand. He was part of the detail closely guarding Wolf and was wearing gloves, but the partly unbuttoned shirt pooched open and exposed his skin. Rourke smiled and left the room. He left the room and not far from the main hall entered another door that led to a short hall. Straight ahead was a fire door with an exit sign above it. He chose instead a room off to the side, which entered onto a small break room, one of several on this floor alone. There was an officer at one of the tables, having some coffee and looking at his phone. Rourke sat to his left and put his left forearm out flat on the table. The officer looked up. "Officer?" he said, in a tone of voice signaling a desire to introduce himself. He held out his right hand to be shaken. The officer put down his phone and reached out to Rourke. The moment their hands touched, Rourke sagged until his head hit the table with a soft thump. The officer was not concerned. He briefly looked Rourke over, laid his other hand on the table in front of him, then stood up. He checked all of his gear, then walked out of the break room and back into the short hall. He walked down to the exit door and turned around, looking for all the world like he'd been sent to guard that door. He took out his pistol and unloaded it by removing the clip and checking the chamber. A few minutes later, Grant came out of the door opposite the break room. It was a door that led directly into the courtroom. The moment the door opened, there was a loud ruckus coming from the courtroom. A lot of people were shouting different things. Grant, removing his gloves, walked towards the police officer, who held up a hand. "What's going on in there?" Grant scowled. "Out of the way, rookie." The officer did not move. "Sorry, Lieutenant, I was instructed to guard this door." "By who?" Grant snarled. "My superior officer. Take it up with him," the officer advised. "I will," Grant said. He made a move and quickly put his hand on the officer's neck. For a moment, they both stood there, frozen. Then the officer said, "I'm sorry, Wolf. You can't do that. Not to me." Grant's eyes widened. The officer made a swift move, pulling Grant's hand off his neck and twisting it behind him. The officer, now behind him, said in Grant's ear, "How would you like to do this?" Grant made a move with his other hand to reach for his weapon. The officer quickly pulled his head away from the wall and then back into it, knocking him unconscious. "Sorry, Grant," the officer said. The officer, Grant over his shoulders, fireman style, walked into the courtroom. "Where did Wolf go?" he asked the first officer who had looked his way. The officer pointed. "In the judge's chambers. Ambulance is on the way." "Should we call for another?" "We'll be fine, thanks," the officer said, making his way to the door of the chambers. Inside was Wolf, unconscious, the judge, and a couple of officers from Grant's detail. "What happened to Grant?" one of them said. "Knocked his head," the officer replied, "but he let me know that something needed doing." He put Grant down in the chair next to Wolf's unconscious form. Grant's officers looked at each other but said nothing. Almost immediately, Grant started coming around. The officer came in close to Grant. "I suggest you go back," he said close to Grant's ear, "or things will get very complicated for you." Grant glared at him, then reached over and touched Wolf's neck. Wolf woke up, but Grant started and pulled his hand back. The officer reached down and took Grant's hand, then pulled him to his feet. He stepped him away from Wolf and put him in another chair. He looked at Grant's eyes very intently. "How are you feeling?" "Not great," Grant said. In a low voice he added, "Did I get whacked on the head? My forehead hurts." "Yes, but I don't think you have a concussion," the officer said, similarly low. "Your detail will have seen you touch Wolf. I suggest you replace them, or at the least reinforce that Wolf must not be touched." Grant nodded. He looked over at Wolf, awake but still shackled. "Got it," he said. He shook his head. "That was weird." "Yeah," the officer said. "You'll be okay." "I will," Grant said. The officer straightened up, nodded at the other officers and the judge, and walked out. He left the courtroom by the side door and went across the hall to the break room. There was still only one person there, Rourke, who was asleep on the table, arms still splayed out in front of him. The officer sat down next to him and lightly touched the back of Rourke's hand. Rourke awoke, and the officer started. "Damn," the officer said. Rourke straightened up. "Sorry about that. Drifted off," he said. "Yeah," the officer said. "I just had a strange sense of, I don't know, deja vu maybe." "Not really. Something weird." He looked at his phone. "Shit, my break is up. Gotta go." He got up and left the room. Rourke texted Alma. "All good. Pick me up?" She texted back. "Yes, I'm already out front." When Rourke got into the car, she asked, "How did it go?" "As I expected. I was able to stop him, for now." "And the plan?" "Go back to him, see what I can find out." Alma sighed. "We already know that he can't be saved. He's going to try to escape again, isn't he?" Connor nodded and simply said, "Yes. Thanks for being here. Someone's got to back you up in case it goes awry. I'm unlikely to be hurt by Wolf. It seems that he has let his power go to his head, make him think he's really invulnerable. I used the simplest moves on him, and he had no idea how to counter them." "All the time in the world, but none to make himself safe," Alma said, shaking her head. "Like so many others," Connor said. Connor was texting on his phone. "When are you going back?" Alma asked. "I'm texting Grant now. I'm thinking tonight." "Dinner, then," Alma said. "Thai?" "Thai is good," Connor replied and grinned over at her. Alma made a concerned face. "So how much does Grant know now?" "Not everything, not by a long shot, but a lot. He knows that we have powers and they involve touching people. Beyond that, I'm not sure. He's smart, and even being unconscious for a while, he can probably figure out more, especially since some officers and the judge can tell him the story of him being brought back in unconscious. But I know him well, and I know the sort of person he is. He won't try to out us just because we're unusual. Unless he thinks we're being dangerous to others, he'll leave us be." Alma nodded, but looked worried. After dinner, Alma dropped him off at the court to get his car, and he drove to the metro where Wolf had been returned, according to Grant. This time, Wolf was in a special medical room due to his fainting at the trial. Grant had done a good job of making sure no one would touch him directly. Now that he was found guilty, even if the sentence had not been handed down, Grant had more leeway. Grant was at the door with a couple of uniformed officers. He took Rourke aside. "There isn't any recording equipment in there," he said. "We don't hold interrogations when people are under medical watch. Defense attorneys would love that. There is the capability of recording, but it's not on. So talk to him if you got to, but keep it off the case. I don't want an appeal." "You'll have nothing to worry about," Rourke assured him. "Thank you." Rourke entered. Wolf, shackled to the hospital-style bed, looked at him. But he didn't glare. His look was somewhat cautious. "Rourke?" Wolf said. "Yes," Rourke said, sitting in a chair near him. Wolf could have probably touched him if he tried, but he didn't try. "So, you really can do what I do?" Rourke nodded. "How long?" Rourke lifted an eyebrow. "How long have you been alive?" Wolf asked. "You know how long I have been. One day, about 10 years old, and when I touch someone, I can move my mind into their body. Did it by accident at first. Had to hide it." He stopped abruptly. I don't want to tell you more, not unless you tell me things back, Wolf said. So, how long? I'd rather not say that, Rourke said, but longer than you. By a lot? I'd say so, yes. Wolf nodded. Yes, nothing to stop you once you know how. I understand there are more of us? There have been, yes. We are quite rare, but others pop up from time to time. And you look for them. I have to, Rourke said. I'm the only one like me. In what way? I'm not sure why. Maybe something about our powers alters our brains as well, or our minds. They aren't exactly the same thing for us. Or maybe it's the power to take over someone's body. Power corrupts. But in any event, all of them have been like you, unfortunately. Twisted, immoral, narcissistic, greedy. Wolf sneered a bit. And you aren't? I cannot claim to be perfect. And certainly I wasn't in my youth, but I overcame it. But you think I can't, or won't? Rourke nodded. So what? You'll keep an eye on me in prison somehow as the police advisor or whatever, forever? If you die and no one touches the body, that will be the end of it, Rourke said. Sure. They can't keep me in solitary forever, not for nothing. At least nothing you can tell them about. If I act the good boy, eventually they'll let me among the prisoners and the guards, and then I'll be gone. We are both patient beings. Yes, Wolf said, patience. I learned that a few times. Most recently in 1929. That put me back. I've been very patient ever since. Even in the courtroom today. Yeah, if you hadn't been there, I would have been gone. I saw my moment, and I took it. Messy. Not a nice handover like you've managed before. No, but I have my ways, my fail-safes. I'm sure you do. How many of us are there? Wolf asked. Rourke considered this. Very few. I will not put a number on it. And they're all wicked like me. They are all different, but they're also all like you. And you'll stop me. Or hunt you down if you escape. Rourke sounded tired. A shame, really. We are quite remarkable. Wolf sneered. Remarkable, yes. Rourke stood up. Goodbye, Mr. Wolf. Without waiting for a reply or looking back, Rourke left the room. And that's the end of part 4. Next week, I'm hoping and thinking I'm going to do like a scary story or horror story of some sort for Halloween, but I'm not 100% sure. And regardless, there is, of course, more to do with this story, but like I say, then we might take a break for a week and do a scary story for Halloween. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let people know about it. CryptoBiography is, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, CryptoBiography.com, or you can write to us at CryptoBiography@gmail.com if you have any comments or questions. And we do appreciate any reviews, say, on iTunes. And thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Words and music, copyright 2018, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved.